We all have things at home. We all have our own health to worry about. We all have parents to think about. Like we all have the same things. But the thing that makes you perceive it as a stressful thing or not is off your current state. Episode 20 of Pursuit of Balance. What is up, y'all? We're going to talk about the two biggest stressors that most of us deal with in life and why those are the two biggest stressors. And most importantly, like, how do we address them? You know, stress management for me is a topic that I love talking about. It's also a topic that I feel like sometimes I have the least amount of answers to, because at the end of the day, stress is much easier to talk about fixing than it is actually addressing and fixing. But you know, for me, on an original like one-on-one meeting with somebody, when I go through an assessment, talked about this a little bit last week of like going through background, medical exercise history, goal setting, nutrition background, stress levels, things like that, and a little bit of sleep. And you know, for me, it almost kind of makes me sad to see how high the levels of stress people operate at are, and I was talking to this with a coach a couple weeks ago. It was like when I was doing my blood work, I use this company called Inside Tracker. Now, for those that use Whoop, they actually are connected to Quest Diagnostics, so you can do your blood work and it gets uploaded to the app. Long story short, I was basically like the only thing, all my blood was fine and everything was good and optimized or in normal ranges. Cortisol was high. Only one. And I was like, damn. I thought I'm a pretty stress-free dude, Like I'm a little type A, a little bit like OCD in certain things, but like for the most part, I feel like I don't have a subjective psychological reason for me to be stressed. I feel like life is good. But it kind of goes to show you that, like, hey, sometimes maybe we're a little more stressed than even we think we are, right? So that's why I think from a quantitative perspective, it's good to address those things. It's good to test those things, right? This is probably an episode that's honestly going to come up in the next week or two, is like, you can't hack what you don't track, and talking about why that stuff is important, but let's not go on the tangent. So, the stress management thing for me is something that I always kind of said earlier in my career. I was like, this kind of feels like out of my scope of practice. And then, during the pandemic, I really picked up the amount of reading that I was doing compared to normal. I was reading such a slow rate, doing more like Audible, audiobook, stuff like that. And, I started to read a lot in nutrition, but a lot in mindset. And I really fell in love with like stoicism, right? Like stoicism for me was kind of like, I don't know. Sometimes it was hard to explain to people, but it was probably the one that I think, as far as like an approach to living, an approach to the mindset, the perspective changes that we can make, that resonated with me the most, right? It's not this like, don't just be rock hard, be unemotional and be stoic like that. I think that I probably perceived a little bit from the outside. And I kind of, it was more aligned for my style of living, right? And my style of thinking. They're like, hey, at the end of the day, shit's going to happen, like at the end of the day, worst case scenario. I mean, like for me, when I think about, maybe jumping a little bit ahead here, but like I think about worst case scenario a lot, when I'm in something new, right? I think about it less as I get more developed, so I get more matured in anything that I'm doing. But it doesn't matter if it's like new business endeavor or, back before, meeting my wife forever ago. It's like you get in a new relationship. It's like, is this the right person? It's like it's easy to overthink certain situations. And that kind of created a little bit of analysis paralysis for me. But it was always like, well, what is the worst case scenario here? Like, what if the business fails, right? I thought about that a lot during the pandemic of like, well, fuck, like, what if I'm not unable to open up? Do I just choose to take the illegal route and say, fuck it? Like, we're just going to do what we got to do to make this work? Or do I just remain silent and handcuffed to what the government's allowing us to do? And like, maybe I can't go into business, but I still have to pay rent. I still have to do all these other things. And like, so I started to have a lot of like, in a sense, negative reflection of like, well, if it does fail, it fails, right? And like, and I think it's a harsh way to look at it sometimes, like hearing that for people. But I think for me, it's like, when I always looked at the worst case scenario, the question for me is, would I be alive? And the answer was yes. The answer was, would I be able to get back on my feet and do something again or move forward? And I still think about it to this day. Like, I do not have a plan B, C, D, or E that scares me. It's like I always say, if worst case scenario, I lost everything and I had to start over, I have skills that I've developed in my 17-year career that would allow me to get back on my feet and go get a job, right? And I think that's kind of like the coolest, most empowering thing for people when we think about certain things is like, you can get back and do it. Yeah, sure. You got to go back a handful of steps, or you got to start all the way over. You got to start at zero. Do not collect $200. A little Monopoly reference. But whatever, right? Like at the end of the day, like what I talked about in last week's episode a lot was like the work is the goal, right? So it's like as long as I'm working, I'm happy, right? And I think about that with like, my some of the things as far as like income goals or like financial things that I set. A lot of times, like when you're a kid, you're like, yeah, I want like $100 million. You ask yourself as you get older. It's like once you figure out you're what makes you level, what's your baseline happiness, and then like everything over it is a pretty diminished effect, right? But the worst case scenario thing for me was always easy to reflect on. It's like, well, like worst case scenario, I'd start over, right? And like, yeah, it'll be hard, but like I'm not scared by that, so I'm not going to be scared of the inability to fail, right? Or the ability to fail if possible. So I want to come back to the two things, right? So there's two things for me when I think about, and this is kind of what today's episode will be titled, is the top two things that I see as stressors for people are number one, work, number two, family, right? And I don't say this in any order, but those are the two things, right? Some people, family is more stressful, and some people, work is more stressful. I think no matter what, these two things bleed into each other, but the question is like, how do we optimize those things or change our perspective around these things so we don't have to make these stressful things in our life? So the number one thing on like the mindset side is this perspective of like I always have this kind of saying, invite it, don't fight it, right? Like where we create stress is when we create friction around us doing something, right? Like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to work these hours, right? Or, oh, I have a kid. I have to wake up 3 times a night. But at the end of the day, it's like, I'm like, hey, we made the choice to take this shot. We made the choice to have this baby most times. Like sometimes there's things that I think maybe are less applicable to that statement. Like some of us just need to work because we need to make money and we have to do it, right? I think about that sometimes when you hear those stories of single parents working 2-3 jobs and having kids. And like, there's so many scenarios in life that give me such an immediate state of gratitude and also like, what the fuck am I complaining about? There's so many people that have it worse. But it also empowers me to not only change my perspective if I'm going through a season of that or a stage of that, but also more importantly, change what, like, for example, this, right? Like for me, the thing that has always been such a big motivator for me and thing that fills my cup is just helping other people, right? Like hopefully empowering other people to think for themselves, empowering people to change their lives to better by bettering their health and their fitness, changing their mindset, making more money, like doing the things that give you the life that you want to do. Like that was always something that was just like empowering to me. But when I come back to this kind of work family dynamic, right, I always say like, okay, like number one, it's like, okay, which one do you think is worse? And I think subjective, right? Some people, for me, I'll just say this right off the bat, like I'm grateful and privileged enough to understand that like I have a good relationship with my family, parents, brothers, my wife, good relationship with my friends, obviously. Like I don't have like negative stuff around me. And then I go to work, I have a great team. So I'm surrounded by that. I have great clients, like and you get these one-off situations. We all have little moments in life with a coworker or, in a relationship, like little things. Well, like that's part of it. That's growing pains. That's not something that I look at as a negative thing. But I know so many people that are really stressed out with either family dynamics, but more importantly, I think this comes from a lot of parents, right? There's a lot of parents that are stressed out by parenting itself, right? And and sometimes I feel like a little bit of imposter syndrome even bringing up this episode because like I'm not a parent yet, right? Like, so I can't speak from my experience, right? I can speak from my experience of as a son, like what I was raised, like what my parents kind of perceived is what they did in the process. I see it with clients all the time. There's little things. I mean, obviously I'm a parent to my dog, I guess. So I gotta give me some respect here. I have Kona. She's a great dog. But no, I see this more with the parenting side. And I always try to kind of reflect back on this is like, okay, as a coach in my role with someone that is stressed out with work or family, right? How can I help better their capacity to handle more stress, right? And over time, I think one of the things, this podcast, my emails, things like that, is like to help hopefully change our perception and rewire our mindset a little bit to kind of think about things differently, right? Because like I said, and I don't want this to be offensive to people, at the end of the day, majority, if not all, stress is perception of your thing. It's not what the thing is, it's your perception of the thing, right? So, yes, there are some quote unquote physiological stressors. Like if I am malnourished, I am dehydrated, I am overtraining, I am under moving. Like there's things that can create stress for the body. So don't get me wrong. But I think when you think about, like, for the sake of what I'm talking about, like when I look at an assessment for somebody, they are ranking their levels of stress subjectively. They're saying, I think I'm a 7 out of 10 on stress. And when I come back to stress rating, like what is the goal, right? Like what is the stress level? Should we be shooting for 0? And like I I kind of go back and forth with this. Like I would think, yeah, like why would I not want to have like a stress-free life? But I also understand that all growth comes from a healthy amount of stress. And like a kind of a saying that I say to everyone joining a gym is like, isn't this interesting that like fitness and exercise is one of those things that you get to do for yourself to build a bigger capacity for handling stress and handling pain physically, but it's also a stress, right? So if you think about exercise as a definition, exercise is a microdosing of stress, right? Calorie deficits, fasting, things like that. These are all like my hormetic stressors. Cold plunging, sauna, things that I'm a huge big fan of too, right? Exercise, heart rate, like all these things. These are all things that we can kind of hormetically stress the body with a healthy amount of stress, microdose properly, with healthy amounts of nourishment and recovery in the back end, we get stronger, right? When it's unhealthy is because we're not recovering, we're not nourishing, we're overtraining, right? So that's where some of the nuances of training kind of lie, is like you need enough intensity to create stress and a stimulus for adaptation, but you don't need too much that's going to send you backward and actually make it hard for your body, right? One of the interesting things that I kind of still feel like I'm trying to figure out from a coaching perspective is like if I have a client that's really, really high stress, or really, really unconditioned, hasn't been in the gym for a very long time, I need to be aware that I need to get them to do enough to see results so they stay motivated. So they actually are like can kind of reduce their stress based off the psychological win, right? Like, we want to, I like to leverage biochemistry. Like I want you to have the dopamine hit of the chase of the thing, right? Of the achievement of these micro wins, right? So, for me, it's important to make sure that you guys understand that you need to be in an environment and a structure that's intense enough to give you the results that you're looking for, but not too intense to mentally defeat you, demoralize you, to overtrain you so you're so sore that you feel debilitated to do everything and anything outside the gym. So there's like that sweet spot, right? And I think obviously that sweet spot is going to be different over time because based off your level of fitness, based off your lifestyle, you're able to take on more. Like if you think about a professional athlete, right? We think about like the LeBron James of current like active athletes, right? Or like the Tom Brady's and like when I think about this current generation of like quote unquote older athletes that were playing really, really well, high prime into old age, how they did it is they spent ungodly amounts of time, energy, money, and resources into recovery, right? Like there was that article in Sports Illustration forever ago that was saying that like LeBron spends like $1 million a year just on recovery. So these are extreme examples that I like to give people, but understand that like the foundation of your stress, your sleep, and your perception of stress overall dictates how well nutrition works, right? How well you digest food. It dictates the cravings that you're going to have. A lot of people that I know, when they put stress eating as the thing on their nutrition plan, the first thing I do is I say, I'm skipping the nutrition question. I'm going straight to stress, right? What stresses you out? How do you manage it? Why does it come? So a little bit of like reframing things for people, I think it's important to understand that like, stress is healthy. So coming back to that thing of like, do I want to be at a 0? Like, do you need to be monk level stress? And I think that's subjective, right? I think that's up to you. I think if you want any growth in your life, I think if you want to achieve anything that's greater than maybe just the basic average of what most people kind of accomplish in life, then yeah, you're going to be stressed out, right? If you want to raise a family and you want to raise good kids, yeah, it's going to be stressful, right? I think about that with business all the time, and I'll take a lot of these kind of principles with me in the future when I hopefully have kids, right? It's like when I have kids, I know it's going to be stressful. I know I'm going to be like underslept. I know I'm going to be a little frustrated sometimes. I know, but like the higher your standard is, sometimes that can make quote unquote it stressful. But I think I'm going to come back to this in a second, that like the perception of that's a different thing. But like having high standards with work is sometimes what makes it stressful, right? Like think about it this way. It's like if I didn't give a shit about work, oh, I don't care if my team shows up late, if they dress however they want, they're distracted the whole time. Excuse me. I'm okay with it, right? So like I'm choosing to remove the tough part of my job, which is having tough conversations, managing, holding people accountable. So by definition, that would make my work less stressful, right? Because people are just avoiding all the hard things, right? But what I'm going to deal with is the long-term stress of the failure of the business, right? And when I think about this with kids, is like if you're raising good humans, you're going to put a lot of work in, right? Because if a kid's staying with you till 18 years old, you have 18 years to shape this little child, boy, girl, whatever, to become a good human, to be an adult by themselves, to go be a good citizen, to go be productive with work, to raise their own kids, to be good humans. So when you think about that cycle, it's like, okay, yeah, like there's just like a lot of work. But the thing that I like kind of want to reframe back is like if you are a parent and you chose to make the decision to have kids, like, hey, I'm assuming there's probably a reason, right? Like there's obviously sometimes that like accidental pregnancies happen, but like, for most of us, if we're choosing to make the decision to have a kid, first thing you need to remember is like accept the fact that you chose to do that. Second thing, understand that like if you want to do it right and you want to create good humans, right? And you want to have a good relationship with your family, that's also going to be hard. Like if it's like choosing for it to be quote unquote easy during your time is like, yeah, you could be dismissive. You can be not present with your children. You can choose not to hold them accountable. You can choose them to let to do them whatever the fuck they want. They can get in trouble. They can get bad grades. Yeah, sure. Quote unquote. That's easy for you. But what are you doing? You're creating a stress of like, well, now I was the creator of this person and I just let them fuck up their life maybe, right? So I think like, someone else's success can be a stressful thing, right? But the number one thing that I see that is a problem for parents is they don't dedicate enough time to fill their cup, right? And a lot of times we use this time excuse. Oh, I'm so busy. Time, the money behind it, or we're carrying work and we're bringing it home, so I'm unable to shut off. So I think like the first thing I always say is like, okay, remember time is an excuse for motivation. Harsh, whatever, who cares? There's ways for you to do things even without leaving, right? Like there's ways to do home workouts. There's ways to do things. Now it might be harder. I'm not saying any of this stuff is easy. But if you understand that all growth, quote unquote, by definition, should not be easy, that should empower you to accept that, right? Because that awareness around that acceptance is kind of step one, right? Like it's not supposed to be easy. Like if it was easy, everyone would be doing it great. Everyone would be a millionaire. Everyone would have the best kids. Everyone would be super happy. Everyone would be living where they want. But it's like, unfortunately, it's not the reality. It's like so many people are not where they want to be in life, right? So I think the number one thing that I could share if you're a parent listening to this is like you need to understand the importance of doing things for yourself, right? And like obviously my bias is like you need to dedicate time for exercise. You need to dedicate time to making sure that your nutrition, your family's nutrition is going to be right, right? You need to do things for you though, right? And I will say that's different, right? Like for me, it's like, oh, I need to golf or I need a skimboard. I like my cars. And sometimes I need alone time. My wife's really good now at understanding that like it's not super often, but like I just need a little bit of isolation sometimes. That recharges me. And whatever that is for you, if it's hanging out with friends, if it's going on a movie, if it's joining a book club, if it's exercise, it's a little bit of everything. Cool. Do it. Because if you don't make the priority of that, like I was just having this conversation with my dad. I have a tattoo in the back of my arm. It says family, health, and wealth, right? And I said, I put it in order. I put family as number one, health is number two, and wealth is number three, right? As far as what I view as important. So my dad goes, you know what? I would challenge you on that. He goes, I think your health is more important than your family. And I said, I agree with you that like you can't pour from an empty cup. I preach it all the time. That like our health is more important. But I don't know if this is my bias or something that being an older brother or being a man in my relationship, I don't know. But like something that I've created for myself is like, it's important for me to take care of other people. It's important for me for my brothers to be happy. It's important for me for my family to be happy. It's important for me for my wife to be happy, my kids to be happy. It's important for me for my team to be taken care of. It's important for me for my clients to be serviced. So I think I take a lot of that on in a direction of like, for me, family is more important because that is what fills my cup. And selfishly, to toot my own horn, I am able to take care of my health and my wealth on top of that. But I do view my family as number one. And I look at family as a very dynamic thing, not just blood. So you need to understand that, like, if you're not doing something for yourself, you're going to just feel this burnout. You're going to feel exhausted. You're going to feel short-tempered. You're going to feel on edge, and your health is going to diminish. Your sleep is going to suck, right? Your nutrition choices are going to change. Your motivation to cook healthy things, your motivation to exercise, your motivation to move are all going to dwindle, right? And that's just going to make the current thing that you're doing more stressful than it is, right? And that's the perception of stress that I'm talking about is we have things in life. Everyone has things in life, right? Like that's always the reminder. People think that like, oh, we all think we're special snowflakes, including myself, right? But at the end of the day, we all have fucking jobs. We all have things at home. We all have our own health to worry about. We all have parents to think about. Like we all have the same things. Some people are more extreme than others, but the thing that makes you perceive it as a stressful thing or not is off your current state, right? Your frequency, I like this line, right? Frequency of like, the enlightenment versus fear and anger and all these things at the bottom, right? Like on the sliding scale of enlightenment, right? Frequency is what you frequently see was a line that I've just always have fallen in love with, right? Which is basically saying that like what our perception of life is really just the mirror of us, right? If we think, and I think about this all the time, I see this all the time on the internet, and I'm not going to lie, it kind of annoys me sometimes, where you see people that are out of state, out of country, talking about America or talking about California or talking about how bad the world is. And I'm like, you guys are talking about things that like you're not even involved with, right? Like how the hell do you know that's even a reality? And the reality is shaped off media, which was last week's episode. I think so. Like the understanding of like your frequency is what you frequently see is basically saying that like your state of your life, your state of your stress, your state of your reality is the mirror that is in between your two ears, right? It is the reality that you are living. Because I might have the exact same situation. I might have a stressful job. I might have 3 kids. I might have all those things. But what if my stress was a 2 out of 10 and yours was a 7 out of 10? What makes it different, right? So I want to challenge you to kind of think about that, right? So like think about that for parents. I would say the number one thing I can say is like setting boundaries with your work, right? Having structure at home, right? So a structured routine of like maybe when you eat or what you're doing for kids, and like also understand that like from a health perspective, obviously, like it's important to like if you want to take care of your health, why would you not want to take care of your partner's health and your kid's health, right? So like get everybody on that journey with you. But most importantly, I think the biggest mistake I see is people are not doing, and I see this more with moms, right? Because moms are just very naturally nurturing people. And that's what makes moms mom. And that's why I love my mom. That's why I love moms in general. Is like these are just like biologically a nurturing person, right? And they will put so much in front of themselves to make other people happy. And it's not, and I don't want to make this gender specific because there's plenty of men that I know that overwork because they're trying to take care of their family, etc. But if you are a more nurturing person or someone that wants to take care of it, it's a very normal thing as far as your personality to want to take care of other things and forget about yourself, right? And I can't say this enough to what my dad said, right? Like it is important to take care of your health, right? Because if you're stressed out because your health is suffering or you're stressed out because your money and finances, that's a lot of things like when people like what's the number one reason people get divorced, right? It's finances, right? So there's aspects of that make that important, right? Which is kind of going to segue into the next part. Like why is work so important? I almost made the podcast today of like how the most important life hack or the biggest life hack I think people can make is finding a job they enjoy, right? I see this all the time with my wife. I see this all the time with my friends. I see this all the time with clients that people literally complain and bitch about their jobs. And I don't want to knock on people's jobs or their perception on it. I just want to challenge you to think about these things that if something that you're going to do for 40 years of your life for, 2,000 hours a year, it's a huge chunk of your life, right? And I think it's important because I think making enough money to support the lifestyle you want is important. I think it's important to have the reality of what is a realistic lifestyle for you? Like, do I need $100 million to be happy? And the answer is no, right? Do we need money to be happy? Yeah, because there's basic needs. I need to be able to afford rent. I need to be able to afford kids or, food for the kids and myself and my wife. I need to be able to afford daycare and school. I need to be able to afford my cars, the gas. Living's expensive, especially in California. But I think the reality of why is work stressful for people is always something that I kind of try to, think about because I this is another privileged statement. I don't stress at work really much. Like I love what I do. And honestly, the harder it gets, and even though it's stressful, like my wife is probably the only person that sees it. Like it'll affect my sleep when I'm in like like a building season or a growth season. But I love building. I love the game, right? Like for me, it's like the game of business gets me up every morning. I just love doing what I do. I love helping people. I love helping the team. So like for me, I am addicted to it. And I will say, I don't know. Like, I mean, I grew up with parents that worked really hard. I grew up with both my parents that, both were born out of country, both built successful businesses in real estate. My dad worked really hard, worked overtime. My mom worked really hard doesn't matter if it was helping the real estate business or raising us. So I grew up around hard work. And hard work was always something that was preached to us. So like, I definitely adopted work ethic wise, what my parents provided me as far as an environment that they were living in. But also the thing that I really, and even something that I kind of even challenge my parents right now too. It's like my mom's like, they're both like a little bit of a stressful season with just some of the stuff with just like offloading a house that they're at here and little things like that. And like, so there is seasons. I don't want to like say that like work should always be stress free, but coming back to that same thing of like, yeah, work is going to be stressful and invite that, right? Don't fight it. Like it's going to be hard, but like, that's what you want. Right? Everyone thinks they want an easy life, right? Everyone thinks like, okay, everything that you want is on the other side of the hard work, is on the other side of the grit, is on the other side of the stress that you went through. And without you going through it, it's like the people that lose money that inherit a bunch of money. You didn't work for it. You don't see value in things. In order for you to find value in things in life, you need to go through the work to create that. Right? If everything was just given to you, there's no value. I always say this to the team. It's like if I were to charge somebody $1,000 a month or $0 a month, the person that's paying more, even if it was the same service, is going to take it more serious because they've created a perception of value, right? Not to say that you should just pay more for things, but like at the end of the day, I say this all the time, right? Like I spent the most amount of money I ever had on education and mentorship about a month ago, and me spending 11 grand on it forced me to take it serious versus me 8 years in a row doing it on my own, thinking, oh, I'm going to get started, analysis paralysis. I never took action, right? So like action is the thing that like really solves most of our stress in life. Like the number one thing that I can take home for you guys, if you were to just listen to one line today, action will solve almost all of the stress that you have in your life, right? By taking action on doing things. Ideally more productivity over busyness, but taking action, right? Like when you can move forward and you can take action on these things, you solve a lot of problems. But I think coming back to the work part is like you need to find work that's aligned for your mission, right? Like working behind a desk, being a customer service person just to get paid. Like, does that fill your cup? No, let AI replace that. I always say that with the AI like takeover that's going to happen. People are like, oh, it's sad that like all these jobs are going to be lost. But I'm like, honestly, my opinion, take it however you want. I think AI is going to take the boring fucking jobs anyways. We don't need to have humans sitting behind a desk. We want humans doing things with other humans, right? Using their hands, services. Like I think things like I feel so connected to my community because of what I do. Because I'm able to be hands-on. I'm able to help other people get better. I'm able to help people change their mind, help people change their bodies. So being quote unquote hands-on with my service is like I think is a productive job for society. If I were to sit behind a desk and answer customer service calls for a living, hell nah. Like we want to build things, right? I think building things is really what's going to make your work fun, right? But then there's the balance of like, yeah, you also need to like find things that you can either make enough money right away or more importantly, grow into something that has a future financially for you so you don't have to deal with the financial stress. I think a lot of people don't have financial literacy, meaning we're not educated in finances, and it's not you to blame. It's our education system. Like we weren't built. Most people don't understand how finances work. And that's where I think educating yourself, quote unquote, take action again, to understand how business works, to understand how some of these like high leverage items of sales and marketing or understanding how to invest your money are important because then you can allow not to work to trade dollars for time the rest of your life. You can learn how to invest things and make you a little bit of money on the side. And over time, those will compound into something that create a future that creates freedom for you. But the most important thing with work comes back to understanding that there's boundaries to it, right? Like I would say for me, when I look at my wife's situation, that she's great at what she does, but she definitely is stressed out with work. I don't like there's no boundaries. And I think right now I will say this, and I'll say this on record. I think the remote work is stupid. I don't think it's good for humans. I don't think it's good for society. I don't think it's good for culture. I don't think it's good for as much productivity. I think there's a time and a place. I think some hybrid model is great. I think that's the most successful route. But I think the more in person we can be, the better connection you create with your team, just because humans connect in person, they don't connect over screens. The better culture you're going to have with the company, and you're going to create separation, which is naturally going to create a boundary for your work. When you go home, you shouldn't just go home and be like, oh, my office is my home. So my home is my work. Because then it's hard because you're never really checking out. You're always like, well, I'm like, my wife's office is our living room. So it's like the difference between her relaxing on a couch, watching TV or eating dinner is about 5 feet away. So it's like, it's hard to create these boundaries, right? So when you think about like, okay, these two stressful things for us in life, it's like, number one, yeah, family is going to be stressful. It's going to have its ups and downs. And I think family, when I say that, I think more this is kind of a scenario for parents that raising humans, I would assume, from my opinion of what I see everyone else going through, is not easy. It's hard. It's hard on you. Not only do you got to figure out your own shit, you got to help someone else figure out their own shit along the way, or one, or two, or three, or four kids do it. You got to be the financial person that's responsible to take care of them. You got to put a roof over their head. You got to put food on their plate. You got to take care of them. You got to raise them to be good humans, or whatever you're trying to do with your kids or whatever. So there's a lot more burden that you take on. Just like the one reminder is like, A, you wanted that. B, don't fight that. Invite that. Like, just understand that like that you can find enjoyment just by simply changing the perspective. Like, I think for me, I'm so excited for kids because A, there's a immature part of me that's never grew up. So I'm excited to just like hang out with my kids and have an excuse to go do fun shit that like most of my friends and like adults don't want to do anymore because they take life too serious. That could maybe be another thing too, is like, the worst mistake I think a human can make in life as an adult is taking things too serious, right? The things that most people are stressed about is because you take it serious. Now, there's a balance. I take my work very serious, but I'm also, I don't want to speak for myself, but I would say if you were to ask the team or clients, I probably feel like one of the most laid back managers or bosses that I try to be, but I find the balance of like, I get work done so I can relax, right? I work hard so I can enjoy time with my family. So like, there's always a balancing act, aka pursuit of balance, yo. But the number one thing for parents, like I said, is just a reminder is like, A, change the perception of the reality, right? Like that you are raising humans and that is a gift and a blessing, right? You get to do that. You don't have to do that. Some of us have to, right? Some of us are in tougher situations. Some of us like have a kid unannounced, right? Some of us have to raise kids as a single parent. Some of us have to do it working 2-3 jobs. Like there's some of us that really, really like, I am empathetic about, and I think it gives me kind of a gratitude around like, fuck, like it could be so much worse. It could be so much harder. But the most important thing is like, you need to do something for yourself. If you're not able to take care of like just giving yourself a couple hours a week to work out, or dedicating maybe, an hour or two a week to hang out with your friends or girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever, or like to hang out with the guys. I don't care. Like to have time for your hobbies. Like, we create this like fence around us mentally that we think, oh, I just don't have time to do any of this stuff. In reality, it's like, you do have time. You just don't have motivation. And the reason why you don't have motivation is because you're so stressed out that it's taking all the motivation away from you. Stress is a drain, right? It is a drain if you are chronically stressed. Acute stress, little microdosing here and there, yeah, right? Work is the opportunity for you to create an impact on the community that you are, right, around. That was the number one thing that I always look at when I think about like the purpose of my work was always like, what exercise and fitness did for me was something that I wanted to share with other people, right? Exercise for me was the thing that like gave me more confidence. I was a skinny, weak kid, right? So exercise gave me confidence through that. It allowed me to build discipline because it's hard work to exercise and more importantly, see results from exercise. 3, it allowed me to have a higher pain tolerance because by definition, pushing the boundaries of progressive overload is the pain threshold. And that pain threshold is not physical, it's mental, right? There's something magical that happens in the brain when you're able to get yourself past a boundary of effort that you don't think is capable because your body wants or your mind wants to shut down. But in reality, your body has more. The mind's the one that gives up. So exercise gave me all these things, right? So this is always why it's been such a big part of my life, is like I just see so much of the benefit. I see so much of the carryover for people. So you need to do those things, right? But when it comes back to work, work is also that thing that gave me the opportunity to have a little more freedom, to go take vacations, to buy the stuff that I want to do, but more importantly, to give me the purpose in life, right? Like I wake up with a sense of purpose, right? I love the team. Granted, I was able to kind of build that myself, owning it, but like I also like, my last job at Equinox, I liked what I did. I loved what I did. I liked my team. I liked my clients. So like you can create that internally or externally. I don't think that matters. I think it's just important for you to be picky, right? I think it's important for you to set boundaries, right? I think it's important for you to make sure that you can understand that there is balance. Like a lot of people talk about like, oh, balance is not real. Oh, that's fucked up. Like I saw a quote the other day. It says, balance is not real. It's all about integration. It's like, that is balance, right? Like when I have kids coming up next year, right? When I have all these things that like I'm going to be adding more to my life, but it doesn't matter if it's business, venture, or raising a family. I know there's going to be more obstacles, but it's not going to prevent me from golfing. It's not going to prevent me from being able to be working and have high output with my work, right? It's like, it's just going to create little opportunities and adjustments, or opportunities for me to make adjustments, right? Of like, okay, yeah, maybe integration by definition sounds like a separation, but no, integration is balance. I'm learning how to integrate all these things into my life, right? So those two big things: understand that work is stressful for a lot, family is stressful for a lot. Learn to change the perspective on the reality of what stress is. If you're a parent, if you're someone that deals with family stuff, the two biggest tips I can give you: number one, learn to fill your cup. And number two, I almost totally forgot to say this, the best way for you to handle or fixing stress in relationships is having tough conversations. It's the hardest part. It's the hardest part of what I do at work. It's the hardest part of what I do in my relationship. But the more you can create a boundary and a foundation of your boundaries. God, I keep fumbling my words, of like what you need for you to be happy, or what they need for them to be happy. And the more transparent you can be, the better the communication is, the better the relationship is, right? I know, like, for example, like my middle brother and my parents, like they don't have the best relationship. And the reason why, their communication sucks. So a lot of times when you think about this financially, English is hard. If you think about this family dynamic that people struggle with, I think a lot of it also stems from like the lack of communication. So learning how to have tough conversations, I think, solves that problem. And that carries over to the work part too, right? Like learning how to have tough conversations with your employee or employer is going to dictate your relationship with work, right? Learning how to find what's the right balance of work-life balance and the amount of income and impact you need to make sometimes is tough, and that's also cyclical, but like those are adjustments you need to make along the way, right? But the most important thing is just like coming back to like, are you doing it for the right reasons, and are you understanding that like it's supposed to be hard, right? I think a lot of times we fight stress because we fight difficulty, right? Like it's supposed to be difficult, right? Like if you want to grow, it's going to be difficult. There's going to be friction, right? And this is why exercise is one of the highest leverage items we have in our entire lives, to show ourselves that we have the capacity to do more than we think, right? Our mental is going to give up more than our physical, right? And you're able to do anything and everything, right? And like the worst case scenarios, like an example I gave you in the beginning, is always something I come back to. Like you can always start over, right? And it's like, and the cool thing is worst case scenario almost always never happens if you focus on just continually doing the work and consistently taking action over and over and over again, right? All right, guys. Well, obviously, I'm fumbling words, which normally means for me that I should stop talking. So I'm done talking for today. All right, guys. Well, have a great day, and I will see you next week.